She walked into the lobby like any guest, except every pair of eyes told her she didn't belong. It wasn't the first time Mariah Ellison had felt the weight of a stare, but it had been years since one pressed so hard against her ribs. The kind of look that didn't ask questions. It answered them. She didn't belong here. That was the verdict, and the jury was already settled. Outside, the Seattle morning was cool and glassy, the kind of spring air that carried moisture from the Sound and the faint scent of cedar from the nearby Olympic Sculpture Park. Inside the Crestmore Elite Hotel, however, the temperature was a deliberate 69 degrees, the air filtered and fragranced with something expensive, vanilla, cedarwood, and citrus, if she had to guess. The kind of smell designed to whisper, luxury. Mariah took 3 calm steps onto the black and gold marble floor, the hush of her sneakers swallowed in the soft jazz version of Take 5, playing from invisible speakers overhead. No bellhop approached. No concierge offered a smile. Not one member of staff lifted their chin in greeting. She had expected this. Years ago, she'd walked into a boutique hotel in Atlanta at dawn, wearing sweats after a red-eye flight, and had been told to come back when the manager arrived. That memory still clung to her, not like an open wound, but like scar tissue, invisible to the world, but sensitive beneath the surface. Today felt the same. A different city, different face at the desk, but the same invisible gavel falling. She kept her eyes level as she approached the front desk. Behind it stood 3 people. The first was a lean, sharp-jawed man in a navy vest and paisley tie, posture proud as a captain steering his ship. Brent Halberd. His name tag read General Manager. His eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly as she approached. Standing to his right was a blonde woman with a nameplate that said Taryn Reddick, whose smile was so strained it looked like it had been laminated. To his left, a younger man, Jay Choudhary, early 30s, muscular arms crossed, gaze assessing her shoes first, then her face, then her plain black t-shirt. None of them said a word. Mariah stopped 3 feet from the counter. She didn't shift her weight or clear her throat. She simply said, "I have a reservation. Penthouse suite. The name is Ellison." Brent's brow lifted just slightly. "That's a premium room," he said. Mariah didn't respond. He continued, "Are you sure you booked the right hotel?" She didn't blink. Instead, she reached into her front pocket and calmly placed her government-issued identification and an all-black credit card on the counter. The same card she used only for this reason: to test the rooms she owned and the people who ran them. Brent picked it up delicately, like it might transfer oil to his fingertips. He flipped it over, squinting, then looked at the ID, then at her, then again at the card. "Strange," he said aloud, voice just above normal conversational tone. "This doesn't feel right." Taryn leaned in, frowned at the name, and pressed a button beneath the counter. Her voice rose into the intercom system that rang into the back office. "Security to front desk. We may have an unauthorized guest attempting to access a restricted suite. Possible card fraud." Mariah said nothing. Jay stepped closer, folding his arms tighter. "You know people try this kind of thing all the time, right? Flashy card, high-end name, usually fake." Mariah inhaled slowly, then exhaled through her nose. She glanced to the right, where a row of high-back velvet chairs framed the lobby's edge. A young woman, maybe late 20s, sat beside a tall man with dreadlocks and a camera phone in hand. Lila Jennings and Omar Glenn, if she recalled correctly from the reservation system she'd reviewed 2 nights ago. Travel bloggers, West Coast based. Both had already looked up from their screens. Lila's phone tilted slightly. Not raised yet, but almost. Across the room, Camila Moreno, the concierge, watched everything unfold. She wore a deep green blazer that made her look more senior than she was. Her eyes met Mariah's for the first time. A flicker of something passed between them. Uncertainty, recognition, or both. Mariah didn't speak to the staff again. She picked up her phone and tapped once, 1,000 feet away, across 3 blocks and 15 floors up. Jordan Reese, her executive assistant, saw the screen flash and answered immediately. "It's happening," Mariah said softly. Jordan didn't hesitate. "The systems are ready." Back in the lobby, Brent was turning her card over again, now with a smirk. "You know," he said louder this time, "we've seen this scam before. People come in, claim a reservation, show a black card they printed online, then disappear before the bank flags the transaction. Well, not this time." He nodded at Jay, who unlocked a brushed steel drawer behind the counter and pulled out a digital safe embedded in the back wall. "I'm locking this down," Jay said smugly. Mariah watched as her card was placed inside. The safe beeped twice, then clicked shut. Taryn folded her hands. "You can come back with proof. Until then, we'll consider the matter closed." It was choreographed. Rehearsed. Like they'd done this before. Omar's voice broke the silence. "Are y'all filming this?" he asked his partner. Lila lifted her phone. "They just took her card," she said. Brent, unfazed, waved toward the security desk. "Escort her out, please." Mariah didn't move. "I'm not here to make a scene," she said, voice low. "I'm here for my room." Jay scoffed. "You're not getting it." Camila took a step forward, hesitated, then opened her terminal behind the concierge podium. She scrolled quickly. Her screen flashed Ellison, M, VIP penthouse, owner level, cleared remote check-in. She opened her mouth, but Brent turned and cut her off with a single look. "She doesn't belong here," he said sharply. Mariah looked around the room. Guests were watching now. A family of 4 had stopped at the elevators. The mother was whispering to her daughter, visibly uncomfortable. Mariah turned back to the desk. "You've just made the worst mistake of your professional life," she said. Brent laughed. "You think so?" he said. She didn't look away. "I know so." Then from the edge of the lobby, Camila's voice broke through. Quiet, but audible. "I saw her name this morning," she said. "The reservation is real." Brent spun to her. "Another word and you're out, Camila." Mariah tapped her phone again. "Jordan," she said clearly. "Log this moment. Video timestamp confirmed." "Logged," came the voice in her ear. "System fully engaged." Lila's camera now caught a dozen guests watching. Omar whispered to a woman in a pantsuit beside him. She hasn't raised her voice once. And then Jay, emboldened, held up the silver safe key. "This card is now company property," he declared. "Until verification comes in, it stays locked." Brent added, "You're wasting everyone's time. Walk out now, or we'll make that decision for you." Mariah didn't flinch. And then, as if trying to assert dominance one last time, Taryn stepped from behind the desk, straightened her blazer, and reached toward Mariah's arm. "You've been warned," she said. "It's time for you to leave." The moment her hand made contact, the entire atmosphere in the lobby shifted. There was a sound, barely a breath, but it moved through the crowd like a ripple. A gasp. Then the soft shuffle of guests rising, angling their phones. Lila's voice rang out. "She just grabbed her!" Omar whispered. This is going viral right now. Camilla stood frozen for a heartbeat. Then she took one solid step forward. She's right, Camilla said, louder now. Her reservation is valid. Taryn turned, startled. You stay out of this, unless you want to lose your job. But Camilla didn't retreat. I won't lie for you, she said. And for the first time, Brent's composure cracked. She's trying to scam us, he snapped. People like her always do. The words hung in the air like poison. Mariah stepped forward. Just one pace. Calm. Controlled. And with a voice that didn't waver, she said, You're going to regret this, Mr. Halbert. They locked away her card like it was evidence, and she hadn't committed a crime. Mariah didn't move. Her feet remained rooted to the marble floor, her face unreadable. But inside, her mind moved with precision. Every detail, every raised eyebrow and whispered comment, catalogued like data. She had lived this moment before, not in this exact building, but in places just like it. Places where control was mistaken for protocol, and policy was weaponized against people who didn't fit someone else's idea of who belonged. At 24, she had stood in a different hotel lobby after a sleepless flight. Dressed in sweats, worn from days of meetings, she'd tried to check into a room she had already paid for. The man behind the desk looked her up and down and said flatly, You don't seem like the type to stay here. The shame had stung then, curling cold in her chest. That night, she slept in her rental car. The next morning, she opened a blank notebook and began drafting a hospitality business plan that would one day become Solace Suites. But here, nearly 2 decades later, it was happening again. The setting was shinier, the stakes were bigger, and this time, the lobby didn't belong to someone else. It belonged to her. Across the lobby, a quiet but growing audience was forming. Travelers, couples, business people. Some whispered behind hands. Others simply stared, unsure whether to step back or step in. The silence had weight now, not because it was calm, but because it was waiting. Brent Halbert returned to his post behind the front desk, adjusting his vest as if he still held authority. We've done what needs to be done, he said to no one in particular, but loud enough for everyone to hear. Until the bank confirms the card, we can't proceed. Jay Chowdhury stood beside him, hands on hips, glancing at the small steel safe like it contained a live weapon. That card is staying put, he said. Company protocol. Mariah turned her head slightly, not looking at them, but at Camila Moreno, who now hovered behind the concierge podium. The younger woman's face was tight with indecision, eyes flitting between her screen and the growing scene. She had seen the reservation. There was no denying it. But she was still calculating what truth would cost her. The air was shifting. The soft jazz had faded out, and the new silence wasn't the kind luxury hotels usually curated. It was the kind that warned of an incoming storm. Near the velvet chairs, Lila Jennings steadied her phone, now visibly recording. This is being filmed, she said quietly to her companion. Omar Glenn, standing beside her, was already live. We're at Crestmore Elite in Seattle, he spoke into his phone. And we're watching something very wrong unfold. Taryn Reddick, still standing just feet from Mariah, looked around nervously. Her voice was sharp and practiced. You need to leave now, she said again, the command less confident than before. Mariah looked directly at her. Are you sure? The question wasn't rhetorical. It wasn't laced with threat or sarcasm. It was steady, sincere, like a lifeline extended one last time. Taryn blinked, her lips pressed together. Then, as if to prove something, to her boss maybe, or to herself, She raised her hand toward Mariah again. Before she could make contact, Camilla stepped forward, her voice rising. "Her name is in the system. It's real." Brent's head snapped around. "Camilla, enough. She's telling the truth," Camilla said, louder now. "She's not lying. You're just not listening." A guest nearby murmured something. Another lifted their phone. Mariah didn't smile. She simply tapped her phone once more. "Jordan," she said, "log all video feeds. Timestamp now." "Logged," came the voice through her Bluetooth earpiece. "Backup storage enabled. We're capturing all visual angles." Brent's control was slipping, and he knew it. His voice grew louder, theatrical. "This is a scam," he said. "People like her try to play the system all the time. Flash a nice card, say the right words." "Finish that sentence," Mariah said, still calm. "Please." But Brent's words trailed off. The room had gotten quieter. The onlookers had moved in closer, creating a perimeter of presence, a kind of informal tribunal. These weren't just guests anymore. They were witnesses. Jay stepped in again, raising the safe key. "Doesn't matter who you are. That card isn't coming out until we say so." And from his spot near the lounge, Omar narrated, "They're now doubling down, even with proof of reservation, even as people film. And they don't know who she is." Camilla's hands trembled slightly. She looked over at Mariah. Do you want me to retrieve your card?" Mariah shook her head once. "Not yet." Taryn, who had fallen quiet, suddenly piped up again. "You refuse to provide backup identification. That's a breach. We're within our rights." Another lie. She had handed over 2 valid forms. Mariah looked past her, toward the guest services board. It still displayed a scrolling message. "Solace Suites welcomes you with warmth." The irony made her throat tighten. Across the room, a man in a gray sweater leaned over to Omar. "I've stayed here before. This isn't new." "Say that louder," Omar whispered, pointing the mic in his direction. "It's not new," the man repeated. "They profile quiet guests, especially women of color." Mariah turned to Jay. "Return my card." Jay smirked. "Or what?" Her voice remained even. "Or you'll be locked out of the Solace system permanently. No appeal, no reference, no future." He laughed. "You don't speak for Solace." But Camilla didn't laugh. "She does," she said softly, but clearly. Taryn's expression twisted. "You're out of line, Camilla." Sensing the walls close in, Brent raised his voice again. "This isn't personal. We're following policy." Mariah replied, "The only thing consistent about your policy is who it targets." And then it happened. A short woman in a floral shawl stepped from the lobby's edge, walked to Mariah's side, and spoke softly, but with steel. "You don't touch her again," she said to Taryn. "Not if you want to keep your dignity." It wasn't a threat. It was a declaration. Behind her, another guest moved forward. A man in a dark blazer stood by Camilla. A third guest stepped in with a child's stroller, positioning herself like a line drawn in stone. From the back of the room, Lila whispered, "They're protecting her now." Mariah didn't speak. She didn't need to. She closed her eyes for 1 second and remembered Charlotte, North Carolina, 16 years old, waiting in a hotel lobby for her parents, dressed in her Sunday best. A clerk had told her, "Guests only in this area." She'd tried to explain. They hadn't listened. She was walked outside like a loiterer. That humiliation had burned for years. Now, standing in this gleaming lobby, something in her clicked into place. Brent tried again, desperation mounting. "Security," he barked. "Get them out!" but no one moved. Camila stepped fully in front of Mariah now. Her hands were still, her voice steady. "I've worked here for over 3 years," she said, "and every time a black guest walks in without obvious wealth, this happens. Every time. I've watched it. I've logged it. And I'm done being quiet." Brent's face flushed red. "That's a lie." Omar swung the camera toward him. "You sure?" he asked. Mariah turned to the room, not to one person, but to all of them. "You're watching it now," she said. "This is what it looks like. This is what it sounds like." A wave of silence. Then phones rose again. Brent's voice cracked as he shouted, "She's trespassing!" Taryn's voice joined in. "She grabbed my arm! She's causing a scene!" Mariah stepped forward. "That's the last lie you get to tell today." And then she looked to Camila. "Can you confirm the reservation on your screen?" Camila nodded. "Mariah Ellison, penthouse, cleared by executive override." "And the card?" Mariah asked. "Marked as verified. VIP, owner level." The guests didn't gasp. They exhaled, like the truth had been waiting to be spoken. Brent's voice, now dry, stammered, "Could have been hacked." Lila scoffed. "You think she hacked your system, walked in alone, and brought 200 witnesses with her?" Jay looked unsure for the first time. Taryn stepped back from the desk. Mariah turned to Jay again. "You were told to steal from me. You did. But you still had a choice." Jay opened his mouth, but no words came out. The tension wasn't ending. It was evolving. From confrontation to consequence, the staff had cornered themselves with their own rehearsed aggression. And now the only question left was what would happen next. One guest, elderly, tall, elegant, stepped beside Mariah. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "We see you." And then another stepped forward, and another. A human circle, quiet but firm. And Brent Halberd, once towering behind the desk, now looked impossibly small. He had misjudged her from the first second. He had no idea just how badly. Camila knew, in that instant, she might lose her job, but also that she couldn't stay silent any longer. She didn't need to shout to be heard, because now the entire lobby was listening. It had started with glances. Then phones lifted. Then voices found courage. Now, in the center of a marble and glass cathedral of wealth and quiet power, Mariah Ellison stood unmoved, while the hotel staff who had mocked her were unraveling in real time. No one had touched the intercom since Taryn last barked for security. No one dared. The illusion of control had shattered, and all that remained was the truth, and everyone watching it happen. Brent Halberd's jaw clenched as he watched Camila refuse to back down. Taryn fidgeted, glancing from face to face, as if hoping someone, anyone, might defend her. Jay's hand still hovered near the safe key, unsure whether returning the card might salvage the situation or deepen it. But none of them had moved. Because deep down, they sensed it. That they had gone too far, and that the woman they had underestimated wasn't just another guest. Mariah took one step closer to the desk. Her posture didn't change. She didn't raise her chin or lower her voice, but her presence grew louder with each breath. She tapped her earpiece once more. "Jordan," she said evenly, "please put Talia on the line. I'd like this part recorded directly." "Standing by," came Jordan's voice, calm and unfazed. The safe behind the counter remained shut, her card still locked inside. But the moment wasn't about plastic or numbers. It was about who held the truth and who had buried it. Brent spoke first. "This has gone far enough," he said. "You've made your point." Mariah turned to face him fully. "I haven't started." Jay shifted uneasily. Camila took a measured breath and walked behind the counter to the second terminal. Her hands moved with purpose. She typed, paused, and then turned the screen toward the room. "Reservation. Ellison, Mariah. Owner clearance. VIP tier. Verified 3 days ago." Her voice didn't shake this time. Brent tried to regain footing. "Anyone can spoof a name in a system," he said, but even he didn't believe his own words. "You think someone forged Solace's internal platform, triggered a remote clearance, and walked into your lobby alone for fun?" Camila replied. Before he could answer, a new voice entered the room, this time not from a person, but from the speaker in Mariah's earpiece, now broadcast through her phone's mic. Talia Ford. "Mariah, we've reviewed the incident log. We're recording all verbal actions now. Do you want to proceed with executive action?" Brent froze. The name registered. The title did too. "Wait," he said, blinking fast. "Talia Ford? From Legal Affairs?" Mariah didn't answer him. "I'm ready," she said. The lobby grew quieter than it had all morning. "Then proceed," Talia replied. Mariah stepped forward. "Brent Halbert, Taryn Reddick, Jay Chowdhury. Effective immediately, your credentials are revoked. Your employment with Solace Suites is terminated." Taryn gasped, stumbling back against the counter. Jay went pale. Brent laughed, a thin, nervous sound. "You can't be serious." Behind him, the card readers on their staff keycards buzzed. One beeped red, then another, then a third. Omar's camera caught each reaction in a clean sweep. Brent's flickering disbelief, Taryn's open-mouthed panic, Jay's stunned silence. Camila, standing still behind the terminal, said only, "It's done." The keycards no longer worked. "You've just fired your front desk," Brent snapped. "On camera, in front of strangers. You'll be hearing from our lawyers." Mariah folded her arms. "Your lawyers are mine." The guests who had formed a loose semicircle around her began murmuring. Some applauded softly. Others simply stood with arms crossed, nodding. Lila turned to her phone. "This is history. The CEO just fired her entire front desk in the lobby. No shouting, just power." Brent, flushed and twitching now, tried to rally. "This isn't how we do things. There are procedures." "There are," Mariah said. "You ignored all of them." He pointed at her with a trembling hand. "You tricked us! You staged this!" "No," she replied. "I walked in like every other guest. Quiet. Alone. With ID and confirmation. And you showed the world how you treat people who don't look the part." Taryn's voice, smaller now, broke in. "I didn't mean for this to go so far." Mariah turned to her slowly. "You called security on a verified guest. You locked away personal property. You grabbed my arm. You lied about documentation. And you did it with the same confidence Brent had when he said, 'She doesn't belong here.'" Taryn shrank back, eyes flicking around the room. Jay's voice was barely audible. "What do we do now?" Mariah didn't answer him. She addressed Camila instead. "Access the audit panel. I want every action logged under Brent's credentials from the past 90 days. Filter for complaint dismissals and reservation flags." Camila's fingers moved quickly. Her eyes widened. "There's a pattern," she said. "Repeated guest complaints, marked resolved without action. Same types of guests flagged repeatedly. Women, minorities, mostly traveling alone." Brent's lips parted. "Those were internal flags. Safety concerns. Camila turned the screen toward him. You flagged a 70-year-old woman as potential risk because she called twice about her keycard not working. He had no reply. Mariah looked around the room. The chandeliers above shimmered like nothing had happened, but the lobby itself had changed. You thought this place was yours to control, she said to Brent. But it never was. You just held the keys until someone asked what they unlocked. More phones lifted. A guest in a travel blazer called out, "What happens now?" Mariah met his gaze. "Now we clean house." She nodded to Camila. "Initiate system lockdown. Suspend all pending reservations approved by Brent. We'll vet them manually." Camila clicked twice. "Done." "Notify all on-duty staff that we are transitioning leadership immediately," Mariah continued, "and elevate Camila Moreno to Acting Guest Services Director for this location." Camila blinked. "Me?" "You're the only one who told the truth," Mariah said. "You spoke up when it mattered. And you stayed." The applause was louder this time. Omar moved closer, his lens catching Camila's shocked smile, the wetness in her eyes, the gratitude she hadn't known she needed. From somewhere behind the velvet chairs, a woman whispered, "I've waited a long time to see someone like her win." Lila panned her camera across the room. "Solace Suites just redefined hospitality," she said. "This is what reform looks like in real time." And Mariah, still standing tall, didn't smile. Not yet. Because this was only the beginning. Outside, Seattle traffic moved like nothing had changed. But inside Crestmore, everything had. The moment his keycard blinked red, Brent Halberd stopped being a manager and started being a man with no authority. He stared at the card in his hand as though the thin plastic had betrayed him. Moments ago, he had been the gatekeeper of this pristine lobby, the one who decided who was welcome and who was unworthy. Now the badge was useless, a dead piece of plastic, flashing its crimson denial like an alarm. Taryn Reddick's card was the next to fail, the reader buzzing once and locking her out of the hotel's internal system. Jay Chowdhury tried his with trembling hands, only to watch the screen display "Access revoked." The crowd's reaction wasn't explosive. It was quiet, tense, a mixture of awe and satisfaction. Guests looked at one another, as if to confirm they weren't imagining what they had just witnessed. Phones captured every flicker of Brent's expression, every twitch in Taryn's jaw, every hollow swallow as Jay tried to process what had just happened. Mariah Ellison stood in front of them, calm as stone. Her voice cut through the lobby like glass slicing silk. "This isn't about theatrics. It's about accountability. And today, you answer for every guest you've dismissed." Brent tried to gather what remained of his composure. "You think you can come in here and tear down everything we've built?" His words came out brittle, not the booming authority he had shown earlier. "You built nothing," Mariah said. "You managed a front desk and misused its power. That ends now." Taryn's face flushed pink, a sharp contrast to her crisp white blouse. "We were following his lead," she said quickly, pointing at Brent. "We thought we were protecting the brand." "The brand," Mariah replied, "is every single guest who walks through those doors expecting respect. You turned it into a weapon." Jay looked from one to the other, his voice cracking. "I didn't mean... I thought you were just testing us, like a decoy guest. Is that how you treat anyone who doesn't dress like money?" Mariah's eyes didn't leave his. "A decoy? A threat?" Omar's live stream captured every second, the lens tilting as he whispered to his audience, "It's breaking wide open here. The CEO is dismantling her own staff, and they have no idea how to fight back. Camila Moreno, now behind the desk where she'd been hesitant moments before, took a breath and began typing on the computer. Her hands no longer trembled. She was no longer a bystander. She was part of the solution. "Mariah," she said softly, "I'm pulling the last 90 days of internal notes. There are multiple guest complaints, all marked as resolved under Brent's name. Some of them are flagged as potential fraud even when documentation was provided." Brent lunged forward, trying to block her view of the screen. "Those were safety precautions. You don't understand what it's like dealing with the wrong kind of guests." Mariah stepped closer to him, her voice low but sharp. "Finish that sentence." The silence in the lobby was suffocating. Even the small coughs and murmurs had ceased. Every guest now stood fully still, like jurors in a trial. From behind the velvet chairs, a woman with silver hair and a rolling suitcase spoke. "I complained here 2 months ago," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "No one took me seriously. I was told I'd misunderstood. Was that you?" She pointed at Brent. Brent didn't answer. His eyes darted to the exits, as if imagining a way out. Another guest joined in, a man in his 50s with a lanyard from a tech conference. "You double-charged me for my stay and ignored 3 emails. I see now why." Jay's face went pale. We can fix that." "No," Mariah said firmly. "You won't fix anything. You've already done enough." She tapped her earpiece again. "Jordan, escalate this. I want a full review of every guest complaint tied to this property." "Already underway," Jordan's voice replied. "Talia's compiling a legal file. We've found records of false summaries. Brent submitted them directly." Brent's voice rose in panic. "Those were standard protocols. We weren't—" Mariah interrupted him. "You weren't standard. You were selective. And you've been caught." Taryn started to cry, her hands shaking. "Please," she whispered. "I don't want to lose everything. I was just doing my job." "No," Camila said firmly from behind the desk. "You were following orders, even when they were wrong." Guests murmured again, voices building like a wave. Someone muttered, "Good for her," another whispered. "It's about time someone stood up to them." Mariah turned toward the crowd. "You've all been witnesses," she said. "Not just to this moment, but to the way people like this abuse their authority. Today, we draw a line." The room felt charged now, like static before lightning. Lila panned her camera to capture every face. Brent's panic, Mariah's quiet command, Camila's determined calm. Brent slammed his hand on the counter. "You don't have the right to do this!" Mariah looked at him with unwavering eyes. "I have every right, and more importantly, I have the responsibility." At that moment, Camila gasped softly. "Mariah," she said, pointing at the screen. "There's evidence of coordinated notes with a former regional director, messages sent late at night, discussing how to filter guests. It goes back more than a year." A murmur ran through the crowd. Omar spoke directly into his stream. "It's not just this staff. This could be bigger than this one hotel." Mariah didn't react outwardly, but her jaw tightened. "Send me those files," she instructed. Brent tried to interject, but no one listened to him anymore. His voice had been drowned out, not by shouting, but by truth. Talia's voice came through Mariah's earpiece, calm and precise. "We have confirmation. Brent Halberd submitted falsified complaint resolutions to corporate. We'll be taking legal action." Brent's face drained of all color. Mariah faced him one final time. "You thought this was about me. It's about everyone you turned away, ignored, or humiliated. That ends now." The guests erupted into soft applause, not raucous but steady, a hum of approval that filled every corner of the lobby. Brent looked at Taryn, then at Jay. They looked back at him with the hollow eyes of people who knew the fight was lost. Mariah's voice dropped to a whisper that everyone still heard. "You should leave now." Brent stood frozen, his hands trembling slightly as he dropped his keycard on the counter. "Jordan," Mariah said, "notify building security. Escort them out." Brent took one step back, then another. His once proud posture was gone. Camilla, watching him retreat, said quietly, "This is what accountability looks like." Mariah turned to the guests. "Your voices matter. If you've ever felt dismissed here, today we start to change that." And as Brent turned toward the doors, the silence carried a strange weight. Not just the fall of a man's authority, but the beginning of something larger. Jordan's voice came through again. "Mariah, I just received the files from Camilla. It's worse than we thought. There are coordinated cover-ups across multiple locations." The words settled over her like a shadow. "Send them all to Talia," she said. "This goes beyond a single lobby." Jordan's voice cut through the air. "Mariah, we just found a suppressed complaint log. The cover-up goes back 2 years across 4 cities." The truth was no longer just hers to carry. It belonged to every voice that had stayed quiet too long. The lobby had changed. It was no longer a space for check-ins and concierge greetings, but something deeper, something rawer. It had become a forum, a reckoning ground, where polished marble floors now bore the weight of truth, and gold-trimmed walls echoed not with pleasantries, but with memory and fire. Mariah Ellison stood in the center of it, composed, unwavering. But the story no longer belonged solely to her. Something had broken open in the last hour. Something far older than the incident that brought her here. Across from her, Brent Halberd stood like a man trapped in his own design. Shoulders hunched, lips tight, eyes no longer searching for allies but for exits. Jay Chowdhury leaned against the safe behind the desk, his arms no longer folded in smug defiance but hanging limply at his sides. Taryn Reddick had retreated halfway toward the service hall, her face pale, eyes cast down. But the crowd had grown. Guests had moved closer, and a quiet resolve rippled through them. Lila Jennings whispered to Omar Glenn as she adjusted her phone angle. "We're not just filming this anymore. We're part of it." Mariah turned toward Camila Moreno, who stood at the front desk terminal like she had done it for years. "Are we still logging everything?" she asked. Camila nodded. "Every word, every account. Live feed is backed up across 3 drives. Jordan's team is syncing now." Omar stepped forward, lowering his phone briefly. "Ms. Ellison, would you mind if I asked the guests something?" Mariah looked at him, then gave a small nod. Omar faced the crowd. "If anyone here has ever had a moment at this hotel, or any hotel, where you felt mistreated, ignored, profiled, would you speak now?" A silence followed. Heavy, personal. Then a woman in her 60s stepped forward. Her voice was soft, but unwavering. "Last fall, I stayed here for a weekend conference. My husband and I had requested an ADA-accessible room. They told us none were available, even though I could see 3 empty ones on the monitor when we checked in. The man at the desk," she pointed at Brent, "he told me, 'Those rooms are held for special guests.'" She paused. "I didn't argue. I didn't want trouble, but I slept in a chair that night." Mariah looked at her with quiet respect. "Thank you." Another guest stepped forward, a man in a tan jacket with creased sleeves. "I'm a veteran," he said. Came through with my daughter for her college tour. They took one look at me, said the system couldn't find my reservation. I showed the confirmation number. They said the computer must have auto-deleted it. We had to drive 40 miles to find a motel." His voice didn't rise, but it cracked. Camila, still at the terminal, searched the system. That complaint was logged. It was marked invalid by Brent. Brent said nothing. More guests stepped forward, one after another. A black couple who had been double-charged and never refunded. A young Latina woman who had been asked to prepay in full, though the website said otherwise. An elderly Korean guest whose luggage was misplaced twice during a 3-night stay. Taryn whispered, "We didn't know all this." But it was too late. The weight had shifted. Mariah turned to the crowd. "Your voices matter. And this hotel, this company, has a duty to reflect that." Camila straightened. "Ms. Ellison, I've opened the cross-location portal. There are patterns across at least 4 properties. Same names, same flagged profiles, same dismissals." Jordan's voice came through the speaker. "And we've initiated contact with affected former guests. Many want to speak. Others are considering legal complaints. Our compliance team has requested a full internal summit." Brent's head snapped up. "You'll destroy this place." "No," Mariah said. "We'll rebuild it." Camila added, "But this time, from the truth up." Talia Ford's voice joined in again. "Effective immediately, all flagged reservations across Brent Halberd's staff ID are suspended pending manual review. A full employee audit is underway. Cross-branch alerts are live. Those connected to the Turner cover-up are being identified." Jay took a step forward, voice thin. "I didn't know about Turner." "You didn't ask," Mariah replied. Taryn's eyes brimmed. "We were protecting the brand." "No," Camila said sharply. "You were protecting power." Lila lowered her phone. This is the part no one usually sees. The fallout, the acknowledgement. You always wonder who'll step forward and who'll just step away." Mariah took a breath and turned to the desk. "Camila Moreno, as of now, you are promoted to general manager of this location. I trust you'll lead with integrity." Camila's eyes widened, but her voice didn't waver. "Thank you. I'll earn it." There was applause, not thunderous, not performative, measured, real. Omar turned his phone to the camera. "You're watching it happen. A woman who was humiliated in this very space is now reshaping it, in real time." Mariah looked out across the lobby, where the once ornamental guests now stood shoulder to shoulder, like a jury finally empowered to judge. She addressed them directly. "Hospitality doesn't begin at the front desk. It begins the moment someone walks through the door and is treated as human, no matter how they dress, what they look like, or how quietly they carry themselves. That's the foundation we're setting now." A voice from the crowd, an older black man, called out, "And what about those who stood silent while all this happened?" Mariah nodded solemnly. "There will be accountability. But there will also be education. We cannot change the past, but we can refuse to excuse it." A young woman, perhaps in her 20s, raised her hand. "What about restitution?" Talia's voice answered. "All affected guests will be contacted. Compensation, personal outreach, and follow-up from executive leadership have already been approved. This includes both public and private restitution. We believe in making amends with actions, not words." Omar's livestream viewer count passed 40,000. Mariah spoke again. "You didn't just witness the problem today. You witnessed the correction. And then she turned to Jordan through the mic. Confirm all 3 terminations. Flag their profiles across the Solace system. No rehire eligibility. No references. Effective immediately. Confirmed, Jordan replied. Taryn sank into a chair beside the wall. Jay looked at his shoes. Brent, red-faced and twitching, tried one last time. We built this hotel. We gave our careers here. Mariah stared into him, not with hatred, but with precision. No, you didn't build this place. You just guarded the door and decided who got to walk through it. The crowd fell silent again. And then the final blow landed. Camila stepped forward. We've just received a real-time flag. Solace properties in Denver and San Diego have submitted records that match the Turner-era directives. This wasn't just one location. This was the culture. Gasps. Omar turned to his stream. This just exploded. 4 locations. And counting. Lila stared into her phone's lens. We came for a weekend. We're leaving with history. Mariah stood taller than she had all day, her voice solemn now. This ends today, and tomorrow we start again, with eyes open, ears open, and no more locked doors. The woman in the floral shawl who had stood beside Mariah earlier whispered, We waited too long for this moment. Jordan's voice returned one last time. Mariah, Talia just received a message. A former manager in Portland wants to speak. He says he has information about directives from Turner. He claims this wasn't isolated. It was quiet policy. Mariah inhaled sharply. The truth had just grown teeth, and she knew exactly what to do with it. One guest, tears in her eyes, turned to Mariah and whispered, You didn't just stand up. You gave us permission to stand with you. 3 months later, the same lobby that tried to push her out had become the space that bore her name. The golden sunlight streaming through the Crestmore Elite's tall glass windows warmed the marble floors in a way that felt different now. Less sterile. More lived in. The chandeliers still shimmered, the velvet chairs remained in place, and the grand piano near the corner still caught the light at just the right angle. But the atmosphere had shifted entirely. This was no longer the site of humiliation. It had become a symbol. Near the check-in desk, a new fixture had been mounted, a black-and-white portrait of Mariah Ellison, framed in oak, its plaque etched in clean, bold serif. This space belongs to every guest. No exceptions. Guests passed by without a second glance, many unaware of the firestorm that once ignited beneath their feet. But for those who knew, the image meant something more than leadership. It meant ownership, not of property, but of dignity. Inside the newly restructured guest services office, Camila Moreno stood behind a smaller standing desk, speaking confidently with a new trainee about how to handle complaint logs. Her voice was steady, her posture relaxed. No longer the quiet concierge afraid of being overheard, she now wore the title of general manager with the ease of someone who had earned it, moment by moment. Mariah stood at the back of the room, observing the energy she had helped create. She wasn't here for ceremony. She rarely was. She preferred movement, progress, execution. That's what today was about. She stepped out into the lobby where staff were preparing for the final session of the Solace Forward Leadership Summit, the new division launched under her command. The past months had been a whirlwind. Audits, testimonies, terminations, new hires, press, partnerships, but all of it rooted in one purpose: reform not by apology, but by architecture. At the edge of the room, Omar Glenn and Lila Jennings chatted quietly with hotel staff. They had been invited to speak at the summit, not as influencers, but as catalysts. Their live stream and footage had helped ignite a public conversation Solace could no longer ignore. "You ready for this?" Omar asked as Mariah approached. She smiled faintly. "No, but that's the point, isn't it?" He chuckled. "We never planned on becoming witnesses, but I think people listened because we didn't look away." Lila nodded. "You changed the story, not just for yourself. For all of us." Mariah turned as Camila joined them. "We're all checked in for the summit," Camila said. "Security's light, but present. No red flags from media." Mariah gave a short nod. "Good. We'll keep the message tight. Facts first, vision second. No theatrics." Camila added, "The mural's finished, by the way. Want to see it?" Together, they crossed the lobby toward a side corridor once lined with marketing displays. In their place stood a 10-foot mural, panels of art, images, quotes, and guest testimonials. One corner featured stylized sketches of the guests who had stood beside Mariah that day. The woman in the floral shawl, the veteran, the tech conference father. Another panel included actual quotes from internal complaints that had been ignored and later re-acknowledged with formal apologies. Mariah's favorite was the third panel, a painted scene of Camila stepping between her and Taryn's outstretched hand, frozen in the act of refusal. Beneath it were Camila's own words, "I won't lie for you." Mariah turned back to her, voice low. "Thank you for saying it when you did." Camila's throat tightened. "Thank you for trusting me to say it again." Later that afternoon, in the restored conference hall overlooking the harbor, Mariah stood behind a lectern as the final keynote speaker. The guests before her weren't influencers or executives, but frontline hotel employees from across the Solace Suites network. Housekeepers, concierges, managers, bellhops. The ones who made hospitality happen but were rarely handed a microphone. "I came here 3 months ago," Mariah began. "Not to fire people, not to be dramatic. I came because something quiet happened to me that wasn't quiet at all. And it had happened before. And it kept happening, not just to me." She paused. "Not for effect, but for truth. I didn't change this place alone. I didn't dismantle prejudice with one decision. I stood still long enough for others to speak. And when they did, I listened." Murmurs of agreement filled the room. Heads nodded. Some wiped tears. Others simply sat taller. Mariah continued, "From now on, no hotel under the Solace name will operate without guest equity panels, direct feedback channels, and zero-excuse enforcement policies. That means every story matters. Every complaint matters. Every silence that used to protect power will now be considered a failure of leadership." She gestured toward the audience. "Many of you have worked for this company longer than I have led it. You've seen things that weren't right. You've been told to stay in your lane. Not anymore. If you see it, report it. If you report it, we will act." The applause that followed wasn't roaring, but it was relentless. After the summit, Mariah returned briefly to the lobby. The new staff were wrapping up check-ins. A child giggled as she passed by the mural. A man with a walker was greeted at eye level by a smiling concierge who offered a seat before asking for his name. Everything was as it should have always been. Camila joined her again. "Omar and Lila are heading out," she said. "Want to walk them?" Mariah nodded, and together the four made their way to the main doors. Omar looked back one last time. "You turned a moment into a model. That's rare," Mariah replied. "It's only rare because people are afraid of what they'll lose when they do the right thing." Lila added, "But you gained something." Mariah considered that. She looked at the portrait above the desk, the mural, the busy, unapologetic lobby full of movement and calm. "I didn't gain power," she said. "I made space." As the doors opened and Omar and Lila stepped into the soft Seattle evening, Mariah lingered for just a moment, letting the quiet settle. She glanced around the room and saw a woman in her 70s standing alone, staring up at the portrait. When their eyes met, the woman nodded once. Slow, grateful, knowing. Back in her office, Jordan's voice came through the speaker. "Mariah, just a heads up. Local news picked up the mural segment. You're trending again." Mariah smiled. "Let them. This time we're not hiding the story." Camila stepped inside. "One last update. Internal tracking shows that guest satisfaction scores are up across all properties. The new reporting system is live. No pushback. Compliance is clean. And every former employee let go during the audit has been logged with full documentation." Mariah exhaled. "Good. Keep it moving." A few minutes later, Camila returned with a letter in hand. Handwritten. Elegant. "It came from the woman with the floral shawl. She asked me to give it to you." Mariah opened it. The note was short. "You reminded me that it's never too late to stand tall. I'll never lower my eyes again. Lillian." Mariah folded the letter gently, then looked toward the mural. No song played overhead. No applause echoed. Just the quiet, steady pulse of justice, earned. Mariah Ellison walked back into the lobby, not as a guest, not as a CEO, but as someone who had taken back the space that once tried to push her out. And in doing so, she made room for everyone else. She once entered this place as a problem to be handled. Now she leaves it as a blueprint for what justice looks like when no one backs down. She walked into that lobby with nothing but her name and her dignity. And for a moment that wasn't enough. They told her to leave, to wait, to prove herself. As if existing in that space required more than just a reservation and self-respect. As if her presence alone disrupted something they thought they were protecting. But she stayed. She stood her ground, not with shouting or rage, but with a stillness so firm it shook the foundation of everything they thought was normal. That's where this story began. With a denial. With a gate locked not by metal or keycard, but by quiet prejudice dressed in professionalism. That kind of bias isn't always loud. It hides behind policy. It wraps itself in uniforms and smiles and terms like standard procedure. But what they didn't know was that Mariah Ellison had been through doors like this before. Closed doors. Slammed doors. And she had learned long ago that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is not leave. She stood while they whispered. She watched while they calculated. And when the moment came, she didn't demand power. She reminded them who already had it. In a world that too often rewards the loudest voice, Mariah used silence like a blade. Her quiet strength unsettled them more than any protest ever could. And then something happened. Someone else stepped up. Not a leader, not a hero. Just someone watching, who realized they could not stay silent any longer. Camila spoke. And with her words, a dam broke. That is the real miracle of stories like this one. How courage, once shown, is contagious. It wasn't just about a hotel. It was about a system. It was about the hundreds of invisible barriers that exist for people like Mariah, not in the headlines, but in the everyday. Denied rooms, suspicious glances, extra steps required to prove you're human. She wasn't alone. And when the live stream began, the world saw it too. The staff who had upheld discrimination through neglect and silence were exposed, not just as individuals with prejudice, but as cogs in a larger machine designed to favor the familiar and exclude the rest. One by one, the stories emerged. A veteran turned away. A disabled woman made to sleep in a chair. A father humiliated in front of his daughter. All dismissed because their discomfort didn't threaten profit. Until Mariah made it clear, their comfort would no longer come at someone else's cost. This wasn't revenge, it was restoration. Every policy was re-examined. Every complaint was pulled from the shadows. Every manager who looked the other way now had to look inward. And something remarkable happened. A lobby that once made people feel small now became a monument to their worth. A woman who was denied service became the one rewriting the code. A mural now hangs where silence once reigned, honoring the voices that had gone unheard for too long. And those who had stayed silent, some found the courage to speak, others left. That too was justice. Mariah didn't need to shout to win. She didn't need to fight with fists. She simply refused to disappear. That refusal changed everything. Her story reminds us the greatest form of power is knowing who you are when others try to forget. It reminds us that dignity isn't given. It's owned. That reform doesn't come from apology. It comes from accountability. That allyship isn't a title. It's a choice. And perhaps most of all, it teaches us that the real battle isn't just against one person's prejudice, it's against the systems that quietly excuse it. Mariah faced all of it with composure. She walked through the fire, not to burn down the house, but to make sure no one else got burned the same way again. She turned that space into a blueprint for equity, for courage, for truth. For today, she leads not with bitterness, but with purpose. And the same place that once tried to exclude her now bears her image, her words, her legacy. Let this story stay with you. Let it remind you that change often begins not with grand speeches, but with one person refusing to shrink. Let it stir your conscience and steady your voice. Because somewhere out there, another door is about to be closed on someone who deserves to walk through it. And they'll need someone watching, someone like you, to say, no, not this time. Because the philosophy remains. Dignity is not negotiable. If this story moved you, type the number 1 in the comments. And make sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss a story that dares to speak the truth. The next one might just change your life.